see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Well, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. And I've seen many searching for answers, far and wide, but I know they're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love, love, love. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Everyone needs forgiveness, kindness of a Savior, the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again. Give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King.
At this time, we will be taking an offering. You can be seated.
The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty. Let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide.
this time, the children can be dismissed to Sunday school, and our speaker this morning is Don Heyman.
Well, I stole one of the songs from the stand there because it kind of summarizes where we're headed this morning. As we finish up this alignment series, we'll take a look at some people who actually are in alignment in their current situation and what God does with them, because the situations they're in, even though they're aligned with God, are messy and tough and hard. Sounds kind of like life. Mighty to save. Love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. It's one of the themes of where we'll go today. Take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again. If you could put up the first slide there for us. So I was pondering the thoughts for today. 3 stories and 3 short prayers came together. In many ways, they're kind of independent, but yet in many ways they kind of intertwine. And in that intertwining, we can see what God does in tough circumstances. We've all been through them. Whether it's hard things at work, whether it's loss of a loved one. Some things linger for a lifetime because of the pain. I like this picture for a couple reasons. One, it was a 2 to 3 hour afternoon I spent with my granddaughter Paige out on Fort Wetherall taking photos, and I got a story for that later on in our talk this morning. But how is less more? One of my favorite times, I have 2 favorite times of the day, sunrise and sunset. Now, I'm never up for sunrise, so how can it be my favorite? Well, I've had a couple of them. But sunsets are amazing. If you're in the right spot at the right time, you see this, right? And how do you get that? You get that with less light. When we see things in life start to go dark, God can show us this. This was not intended for, but these areas come from my past that we'll talk about today, so they're very personal. Well, you won't see the details. The basic experiences are very, very much there. And in the midst of those trying times, we'll see God's work in ways that we could never have imagined. And so these three stories should help us. They help me, so you can listen if you like, but this is probably mostly for me. I had another title for this message this morning. It was called 10 Lepers, a Prophet, and a Skunk. I figured I'd throw that in there because it helped lighten me up a little bit. But that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 10 lepers, we're going to talk about a prophet, and we're going to talk about a skunk. And see how God did his work in them and through them. And maybe there's some things that he can do to teach us his truth. Father, your word is truly powerful, revealing, and when you show us how to put your word in action, you can give us those tools and the change in our lives that we need to move from where we are to where you need us to be. Speak through me today. As the prophet Jeremiah said in his first prayer in chapter 1, I cannot speak. And God said, I will touch your mouth and put my words there. I need you to do that for me today. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit. We're actually going to start with the skunk, and we're going to make our way back to the skunk at the end. So let's turn to Genesis 32. I knew that. Kind of a favorite story in its own crazy way. We'll start here, set the stage, and then we'll hit some of the other areas. Jacob. He was a conniver. Stole from his brother, deceived his father, deceived his father-in-law. But what did God say about him? He said, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. Why? We'll take a little bit of a look at that this morning. But when Jacob stole both the birthright and the blessing from his brother Esau, Esau responded in just a really good manly way. I'm going to kill you. No hesitation, no ifs, ands, or buts. You did this twice to me, and it ain't going to happen again. And Jacob had to leave home to escape it. So, he finds himself in a place where the father-in-law that he kind of cheated out of sheep and goats because of the way he bred them was chasing him. He found out that from the other direction, his brother, Esau, who had this death wish on him, was coming at him with 400 men. And what does he have? Sheep, goats, 2 wives, a couple of kids, and some servants. No army, no nothing. and he can't throw sheep at people and win a battle. So he is caught literally between that rock and the hard place where he has no escape. And so the night before he was to meet up with his brother Esau, what does he pray? He goes, I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown your servant. Finally, he got the message. All this stuff that I've been doing and carrying on with and trying to get things from God my way doesn't work that way. I have nothing except what I have from you. And so it's a pretty familiar story. In verse 24, it says, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not go let you go until you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. You have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked of him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask me my name? And there he blessed him. Interesting statement. This is where we live, this whole thing of striving with men and with God. It's what we do. It's who we are. It's what God made us to be. And the striving really comes from a word that means to persevere. It's not like we're constantly fighting, but we work through things. And there are times in our life where things are really, really bad because someone you love dies, or someone you love gets trapped into drugs. And you contend with God. You get mad as can be with God. On a lesser note, somebody gets a promotion at work that you think you deserve, and you probably maybe do. I've been there. I've had those things happen multiple times at work. God, why? I work hard. But this is where we live. And we'll come back to this at the end because I want to wrap up, because it's a good way to conclude some of the other thoughts that we have here this morning. But our next stop is 10 lepers. It's over in Luke. I don't have the verses for all these up here, so you'll just have to listen a bit. So this is where we're headed. 10 lepers. They were in a place of total hopelessness. Jeremiah the prophet, he was incapable. I can't do what I have to do in my life. I'm insecure. I have no real sense of any kind of ability to do what you've placed me in. And then Jacob, powerless. He's caught between this rock and hard place, and he has no escape. So, Hit the next slide, I guess. Should black stuff out, I think. Yes. So, Luke 17, starting with verse 11. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. And Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." Talk about a hopeless state. Short of facing death, certainly back in Jesus' time, the disease of leprosy was a hopeless situation. Book of Leviticus talks about what needed to be done to kind of protect the community from the infection. And it wasn't just leprosy. Leprosy, it had to do with all kinds of skin diseases, but certainly leprosy itself was the primary culprit at the time. I think some of the fashions today, I probably should have picked some up because it would have helped maybe illustrate it. You got the clothes with the torn jeans, the cuts and all the slices and things. And it was fashionable back then as well, except the downside of it was that's what lepers wore. They were required to wear torn clothes as part of their dress, so people would know that they were unclean and they had an infection that could be transmitted. They were also required to wear a cloth over their upper lip and yell when people came close, "Unclean, unclean," to keep them away. There was no physical contact. You had to stay 6 feet away, minimum, and if it was windy, 150 feet. So we have people who are standing in some proximity to Jesus, certainly no closer than 6 feet, and probably farther away because they were such an outcast. People would change street sides, they would change direction, they would do everything to stay away from the lepers. And they had no contact with society except the leper colony. So this is a pretty dire situation for them. Can't get healed. They can't live with their community. They can't live with their family. They can't worship in the temple. Complete outcast, complete separation from what we all enjoy experiencing. And in that hopelessness, one of the simplest prayers, but probably one of the most powerful in the Bible: "Lord, have mercy on me." Lord, have mercy on me. And there's a lot to be said about the parallel between and the analogy of leprosy to sin. That's not my point this morning. My point this morning is These people were hurting. They were in a place where they had no hope, had nothing to do with sin in their lives. They had such a humble spirit, the only utterance they could make was, "Lord, have mercy on me." And so their heart was already aligned with God, but then they're in this dire situation. And what did Jesus do? He had them do something very familiar to bring about their healing. And sometimes we lose some of the simplicity of how Christ works and how he blesses and how he tries to make people comfortable even in ugly situations. When you thought you were healed of leprosy, you were required to go to the priest to be examined. I mean, they didn't have medical centers and medical insurance like they have today. The priest was the one who would examine the sores and the like and make sure that the skin was better. And so they were all well aware of this. So what Jesus did is he made them comfortable in the midst of a really horrible situation. Go see the priest. And they had probably been back and forth to the priest to get examined who knows how many times. And he made them do something, asked them to do something comfortable. And their obedience to that did what? As they went to the priests, they were healed. As they went to the priests, they were healed. And 1 out of 10 came back to thank the Lord. These are situations, as I mentioned earlier, these maybe it is sickness. Maybe it's an impending death of someone you love. As many or all of you know, our son passed away back in '85 after heart surgery. But when he was in grade school and he transitioned, I think it was from second to the third year. Third grade classes were on the upstairs. Because of his heart situation, he couldn't walk up the steps, literally. He didn't have enough wind. He would wait at the bottom of the steps. The principal of the school would come, meet him there, pick him up, and carry him up 2 flights of stairs. That's the story. Sometimes we or someone else is that one that does that. Next slide, please. Some things to think about regarding the lepers. When our son was in the hospitals, one of the things that Rita and I found out going through those hard times, and I'm sure many of you, if you've had sick children, have seen it, maybe to some greater or lesser degree, but one of the greatest enemies, one of the greatest devices of the enemy is for Satan to use sickness and death to separate men and women from God. Over and over again, the people that we would talk to, I hate God. God doesn't exist. Why would he do this? And the best thing we can do in our life when we hit really tough situations is move to God. not away from him. The cry for mercy is kind of really where we are, at least I am. You can make your own judgment. I really have nothing that I can bring to God. Absolutely nothing. But he's a good, good Father. And that cry for mercy is something we need to do, and I need to do more often. He does hear and he does help. He makes us comfortable even in those difficult circumstances. There's all kinds of stories we could tell, but we'll never get out of here. And part of it is some obedience on our part. We have to act when he asks. And he does very comfortable things to help us through those. Next slide. Jeremiah. Fairly young individual when he was called into God's service. Given probably one of the hardest jobs in the world. He had to tell the people of Israel all the things they were doing wrong. And he's a youth, for the most part. He had, when you read his prayer, which was also very short, half a dozen, 8 words, you get this feeling of, I'm really, really incapable of doing what I need to do in life. I'm insecure. I don't know what to do next. That's me. All honesty, that's me. Every time I stand up here, I am absolutely terrified doing this. I am terrified when I prepare. I am terrified when I stand here. Because I can't do this. I get up to play guitar. I stand in the back because I'm extremely insecure. Really. I hide back there to play. That's the only way I get through the music. As soon as I have to step out, even if I don't step from the back and I have to play a little bit of a solo, I go nuts inside. I am so insecure about that. I'm insecure about work. I work with incredible engineers. They know 10 times more than I do about a lot of things. Sometimes I wonder why I'm their manager. Maybe because I can't do the technical work that they do, and it's the best place for me. We all have those kinds of feelings. We all have those things that come upon us. They're not necessarily life-threatening. They're not necessarily the biggest problem in the world, but sometimes everything happens at once. And I have no idea how to even get the first simplest thing out of the way. And that's where Jeremiah is. God dumped this whole thing on him. And granted, we're not necessarily Jeremiah running around being that prophet to the world, but he's put us in life wherever we are. And that call, whether it's to be a prophet or a teacher or an engineer or a mason, whatever the case may be, this still applies. And he can work us through that. Jeremiah 1, starting with verse 4, he goes, "Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I, Jeremiah, said, Ah, Lord, behold, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth. But the Lord said to me, Do not say, I am only a youth, for to all whom I send you, you shall go, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you. Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said to me, Behold, I have put my words in your mouth. Jeremiah, his humility and that alignment with God in his humility put him in a place where he was receptive to what God had him to do, but he felt totally inadequate. And these verses are, again, pretty familiar verses. We've all heard them probably, I don't know how many times. And even when he says, before I formed you in the womb and I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you, and I appointed you a prophet, I appointed you a teacher, I appointed you a mason, I appointed you an electrician, I appointed you XYZ. That's what I called you to do. And so he takes, even with that encouragement, Jeremiah, and maybe sometimes us, certainly me, we fall into that place of helplessness, where we don't know what to do because we feel inadequate and we feel unable. What does God do to remind? He just reminds him again. He says, don't say that. Listen to me, Jeremiah. Listen to me. Like the cry of mercy prayer for the lepers, I love this phrase that God did. He goes, the Lord put out his hand and touched me. In those crazy places of life, God will touch us. He will touch us. This story, we got another cry for mercy, but it's the cry for ability and encouragement. I need help. I need to know where I'm going, why I'm going, how I'm going to get there. But it's basically another cry for mercy. And that good Father will constantly encourage and remind us who we are. And if you read the second half of the first chapter, you will see how God takes, before he sends him out to be that prophet in the world, and to Israel and Judah, it's like he takes him into his study and he talks to him and he says, what do you see? Jeremiah, what do you see? And they go back and forth for a half a chapter where God builds up this character and this confidence in Jeremiah so that he knows who he is and that he can do what God has called him to do. We'll wrap up with Jacob. I love the story of Jacob. He certainly gives hope and should give hope to just about everybody. One thing about Jacob is he knew what was valuable, and sometimes we forget that a little bit. He didn't do things the right way, but he knew what was valuable. He went after his brother's birthright, kind of his first big attack on his brother. I'll give you some food, you give me your birthright. First in line, I get the best of the inheritance, right? And so most of us wouldn't starve our brother. Would probably help him. Well, maybe if you had a bad brother, you might. But most of us would not go to that level of kind of swindling to get something valuable from God. Kind of totally contradictory to one another. And years later, what did he do? Deceived his father, cheated his brother out of his blessing, his firstborn blessing. Cheats us, as we mentioned, he cheats his father-in-law out of sheep and goats and everything. All his possessions he got by working the birthing of the calves and the sheep and the goats. Made himself a fortune at his father-in-law's expense. He was not a good guy. But he knew what was valuable. He knew that place and blessing that comes from the Father to the Son from God was absolutely priceless. And he wanted it. But not the best methods. The story, every time I read it, it just hits me how God can take that kind of individual and transform him. And that evening before he was to meet Esau, he prayed that prayer of not being worthy of what God had, all of God's goodness. What's that? That's another cry for mercy. That's no different than the lepers, and it's no different than Jeremiah. It's a different set of circumstances, but no different. I love the wrestling match. I love the wrestling match. But don't we do that with God? God, if you do this, I'll do that. It's not this physical image, but it's kind of the same thing. When our son died, I did a lot of that. And it wasn't if you do this, if you do this, I'll do that. It was, I'm really angry at you. I hate this. Why? It doesn't have to be a death. It can be any kind of interaction with people that goes sour. But that's where we live. It's where we live. The thing that hits me, there's several things in here that hit me. One of them is in verse 28. This is kind of how we started. He goes, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven or persevered with God and with men and have prevailed. You know what fascinates me about that? He didn't yell at him for it. He actually complimented him. When you stop and think about it, that was not a condemnation, that was a compliment. God's saying, I like what you did tonight. When we wrestle with him, and we persevere with him, and we persevere with the people that we live with and the people that we work with and the people that we serve, God says, I like what you're doing. It's hard and it's painful, but you persevere. The other thing that I don't like about this is verse 25. Broke his leg, knocked his hip out of joint. A lot of times we wrestle with God, we get bumped and bruised. God bumps us a little bit, maybe a little bit more, to get our attention. Why? Look at Jacob. Everything he tried to do to get God's benefit was out of selfish, conniving desire and process. God said you can't do that anymore. You want deliverance from your brother, right? I have the perfect solution. I'm going to break your leg. We don't like that message. I hate that message. I hate that message. But he brings those things into our life. Sometimes they are self-imposed, and I have plenty of those in my life. Jacob had them. Sometimes they're things that are not self-imposed because of what we have done or decisions we have made. And sometimes it's not a broken leg. Sometimes we jam our finger or we stub our toe. We have this little stool next to our bed. It's been there for probably 20 years. Invariably, I stub my toe on that stool, walking by it. But it reminds me, there's something there. Sometimes that toe stubbing that God brings to us is, hey, I'm here. You just bumped into me, and I got stuff for you to do, or we got stuff to change. The other thing I do like about this story, that sometimes I think we forget, I certainly forget, in the midst of the tough things of life, do we ask God for blessing? It's usually the last thing on our mind. And when you look at Jacob's prayer earlier in the chapter where he says, I am totally unworthy of all that you have for me. And oh, by the way, you just broke my leg. But I am not letting go of you until you bless me. Never, never. Do we have that boldness to demand from God blessing? We do. It's here. Ten lepers, one prophet, one skunk. Bring up the last slide, please. When we have less, we have more, because we have learned to really command God's involvement in our life here on earth, and the life in our hearts, and the life in our minds, and our life with others, our church, our families, our friends, the people we work with, even our enemies. So for people who are already, as these were, in this state of humility and alignment with God in that place, let's cry for his mercy. It'll take us through those really, really tough times, because he will work with us in a tender and familiar way to bring us through it. We need to cry for his ability, because as good as we are at what we do, doesn't matter how it means. We really have to do it with God's ability and his encouragement. And lastly, we need to cry for his blessing. He wants us to. He didn't have to do that with Jacob. Jacob didn't deserve any of that. But God did it. He can do it for us. Father, we thank you for the people that you put in your word that take us to places that remind us of us. The things in life that we wrestle with, the things in life that have hurt us, the things in life that we can't see an end to, but your mercy and your blessing is ours for the asking. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for less is more. Boy, do I resist that. And thank you for the personal examples in your life as each of us makes whatever parallel we do in our lives for that. I suppose mine is, I don't know what you do about hopelessness when you're a leper. And then you find out that God's plan is on your way to obeying what he did, what he said to do. You're healed. That's a pretty remarkable thing. Incapable? Yeah. I think each of us has been there. What a great picture to see Jeremiah being told as he is working, or I should say as the Lord is working to bring him into alignment. What a great picture. Come here, Jeremiah. Let me put the words in your mouth and let me teach you how to say them. And the powerless. I need to run. I've got a problem. And the only way out is for me to run. Good. I'm going to break your leg. And then I'm going to deliver you. The mercy of God is truly boundless. And I, every day, need to be taught once again that it's for me. It's a gift to me. Is it that way for you? I suspect it is. Thank you for reminding us of that this morning. As I was waiting for this step in this morning, I was privileged to sit behind the newest member of our congregation. Would you join me in welcoming Ruby Athena to Bethany Gospel Chapel? We are truly blessed yet again. Thank you. The Secret Prayer Sisters are meeting on Saturday, June 23rd at 10 o'clock. All women are invited, even if you're not participating in Secret Sisters. Come for the fellowship, have a great time. There's a form to fill out on the credenza, and any questions, see Barbara Bedard or Terry Schenk to answer those questions. Our missionaries of the month for the month of June are Vivienne and Roger Mboto, serving in Cameroon. You see them there with their family, and we'll look forward to hearing more about them later on in the month. Are there any other announcements that need to be made? Yes, Kim. Thanks. You see that reminder there. This Thursday is the first meeting for the Ladies' Summer Study. And His Mansion trip is next month, near the end of that month. See Melissa today in the foyer if you need to volunteer for that. Was there another hand? Was it Melissa? Was it your hand? Thanks. All right. Yes, sir.
I don't really do prayer requests per se anymore, but I found out last night that Dwight Knight had a stroke last week.
Thank you.
They are in need of prayer.
We have been blessed by the ministry of Dwight Knight over the years, and I was made aware just moments before the service of that. I don't have any other details, but we will be looking, obviously, to be in prayer for Dwight as well as his ministry, and look for more information to pass to you. At the end of this service, we would gather here at the front for those who would be willing, interested, caring to pray for others and for God's will to be done at Bethany Gospel Chapel. Please join us up here at the end of the service, and we'd be glad to have you be part of that. With that, go in the grace, mercy, and peace of God. Amen.